The dust had barely settled when he stepped down from his horse, the sun bleeding orange over the horizon. Jacob Sloan had never believed in fate, but that day, as he stared at the three Apache women standing in chains by the wagon, he felt something inside him shift. The war had ended, but its scars still cut through the land, and through him. His wife, Clara, had died giving birth months ago, leaving behind a tiny girl with her mother's eyes and no one to hold her. When Jacob rode into the frontier town of Red Creek, he was looking for a wet nurse. What he found instead was a crowd, a trader, and three women being sold like cattle. The sheriff said they were captives from the southern desert tribes, quiet, proud, and unwanted. Jacob should have turned away, but then one of them lifted her head. Her eyes, dark, endless, unbroken, met his, and in that instant, something deeper than logic bound him. $6, he said to the trader. The man laughed. 6 for all three. You're either crazy or cursed, rancher. Jacob didn't blink. 6. My daughter needs a mother. There was silence. Even the wind stopped to listen. The trader, seeing the determination in his face, spat and nodded. The deal was done. When the chains were removed, the three women didn't thank him. They didn't speak at all. They simply followed, their steps soundless on the dust, their faces expressionless, but their eyes, those fierce, ancient eyes, watched everything. The journey back to Sloan Ranch was long and wordless. His daughter, Anna, waited at home, barely a year old, crying in the arms of an old farmhand's wife. When Jacob entered, carrying the smallest of the women in his arms after she stumbled from exhaustion, even the baby fell silent. The house, once cold with grief, seemed to breathe again. He didn't understand it then, but the land did. Something old had returned. That night, as he built a fire, he heard whispers behind him, soft words in a tongue he didn't know. The tallest woman, with hair as black as coal dust, stepped forward. "Why did you buy us?" she asked in a low, steady voice. Jacob looked up from the fire. "Because my daughter needs a mother." The woman's gaze didn't waver. "And what of us? What do we need?" He didn't have an answer. He only knew he couldn't bear to see another soul broken. Days passed. They worked the land, mended fences, tended the child. The smallest one, Tessa, he later learned, would hum while rocking the baby to sleep. The middle one, Suna, spoke to the horses as if they understood her. The tall one, who called herself Nolly, watched the skies at night and murmured prayers to the stars. Jacob watched them too, feeling something change in him, a strange peace blooming where only grief had lived. Yet the town didn't stay quiet for long. Whispers spread. The rancher who bought 3 Apache women. It sounded like sin to some, madness to others. When the pastor came to visit, he looked at Jacob with pity and disgust. "You can't keep them here, Jacob," he said. "It's not right in the eyes of God or man." Jacob's voice was calm, but his eyes burned. "Then maybe God should come raise my daughter himself." The pastor left, and that night, for the first time since Clara's death, Jacob laughed, just once, quietly, as Anna reached for Nolly's hair, smiling in her sleep. As the days grew hotter, the women began to open up. Nolly told him stories of her people, how they were hunted, how the mountains once sang for them. Suna showed him how to heal cracked soil using herbs and ash. And Tessa, shy and tender, whispered one night as she fed the baby, "Your daughter, she dreams of her mother." But now, the earth dreams for her too. Jacob didn't understand what she meant. But when he looked outside, the barren fields that had refused to grow for years now shimmered faintly green. The ranch began to flourish again. Grass returned, cattle fattened, and the baby stopped crying at night. Still, Jacob couldn't shake the feeling that the 3 women were bound to something older than he could imagine. Sometimes he'd wake before dawn and find them outside, barefoot, facing the rising sun, their hands raised as if speaking to the sky. They never told him what they prayed for, but every time they did, the wind would change direction, and the smell of rain would follow. And one evening, as the sun fell behind the hills, Nolly turned to him with a gaze that cut through his soul. "You said your daughter needs a mother," she whispered. "Then you must make us your wives. The land will not bless a bond that isn't sealed in spirit." Jacob stared at her, torn between disbelief and a strange pull deep inside his chest. The other 2 women watched silently, their faces lit by firelight, waiting. "3 wives," he said, voice trembling. "The world won't understand." Nolly's lips curved into a sad smile. "The world never understood us either." The night fell heavy and still. The air trembled with something unseen, ancient, alive. Jacob looked at the faces of the three women, each marked by pain, by pride, by survival, and then at the child sleeping peacefully inside. Then so be it, he said finally. If it saves her, and this land, let the world talk. And as the moon rose high, casting silver across the plains, the rancher and the three Apache women stood together before the fire, bound not by chains or fear, but by the strange, unspoken will of the earth itself. The wind that once carried sorrow now whispered lullabies across the Sloan ranch. Weeks had turned into months, and Jacob had begun to feel a rhythm in life again, a fragile harmony he hadn't known since Clara's death. The three Apache women had brought more than their presence, they had brought balance. The baby, Anna, thrived under their care. She no longer cried at night. When Nolly sang, even the cattle grew calm, their heads turning toward the sound like worshippers in a temple. Suna had transformed the barren soil into a patchwork of color, green shoots, wild herbs, and flowers Jacob had never seen in the West before. Tessa kept the house alive with soft humming and laughter, as if the walls themselves had been waiting for her voice to return. Yet beneath the calm, something deeper stirred, something the land itself seemed to hold in its breath. At first, Jacob thought it was just his imagination. He would wake before dawn and see faint shapes moving in the mist outside, tall shadows walking along the horizon, in step with Nolly's prayers. The animals never shied away, they bowed their heads as if in reverence. When he asked her what she was doing, she only replied, "The land remembers its promises. It listens when we speak with truth." He wanted to believe it was only poetry. But the longer he stayed, the more he saw things that reason couldn't explain. Fences he'd never mended stood straight again in the morning. A well he thought had gone dry began to overflow with clear water. And sometimes, when the night grew heavy, he heard voices in the wind, whispers in Apache, echoing like a lullaby from the earth itself. The townsfolk, of course, didn't stay silent. Rumors spread faster than wildfire. Men from the saloon muttered about the witch wives on Sloan land. The preacher warned the congregation that Jacob had made pacts with the heathen spirits. But Jacob didn't care. Every morning, he saw his daughter's cheeks full of color, her laughter filling the air, and that was all that mattered. He was no longer a man just surviving, he was building something that breathed, something sacred. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the red hills, Nolly approached him. Her hair flowed down her back like liquid night. "They're talking about you in town," she said quietly. "They fear what they don't understand." Jacob nodded, staring into the fields. "Let them fear. They feared my grief, too, and it nearly killed me." That night, he found Suna outside, sitting by the corral, humming to the horses. "You should rest," he told her. She smiled faintly. "The land doesn't rest, Jacob. It watches. It tests you." He frowned. "Tests me?" She nodded. "It gave you life when you were ready to die. It gave your daughter breath when grief had choked it. But it wants to know if you truly belong here. The earth never gives without asking in return." Her words sank into him like roots through soil. "And what does it ask?" he whispered. Suna's eyes lifted toward the stars. "It asks that you love what it gave you, fully, without shame. The land doesn't bless half a heart." Days later, Jacob rode into town for supplies. The stairs followed him. Some men laughed under their breath. Others spat near his boots. But when one of them made a cruel remark about his Indian wives, Jacob's fist found the man's jaw before he even realized what he'd done. The saloon fell silent. Blood dripped onto the floorboards. "You speak about them again," Jacob said quietly, "and you'll answer to the land itself." He left without another word. When he returned home, his knuckles still raw, the women were waiting by the fire. Nolly said nothing, but when she looked at him, he felt something fierce and ancient stir between them. The nights grew warmer. The air trembled with energy that had nothing to do with the heat. He could feel the women's presence in everything, in the ground beneath his feet, in the rhythm of the wind, in the stillness before dawn. He began to dream again. Dreams of Clara, yes, but also of the desert, of red canyons, drums in the distance, three women dancing beneath the moon, their shadows blending into one. When he awoke, he could still hear the echoes of those drums fading into the wind. And then, one night, Nolly came to him, her eyes glowing like amber. "The land has spoken," she said. "You are bound now, Jacob Sloan. You've taken its daughters under your roof. It demands the vow." He hesitated, his heart pounding. "What vow?" She stepped closer, her breath warm against his cheek. "To love us, not as charity, not as guilt. To take us as wives before the moon dies and the new one is born. Only then will the land accept you. The other two stood behind her, silent, waiting. And if I don't? Jacob asked, though he already knew the answer. Nolly's voice dropped to a whisper. Then it will take back what it gave, the water, the crops, your daughter's laughter. He stared into the fire for a long time, feeling the weight of everything, the whispers of the town, the judgment of men, the ghost of his dead wife, and the three women whose eyes held the calm of the earth itself. Finally, he spoke. Then tomorrow night, under the stars, I'll make the vow. Nolly bowed her head slightly, and for the first time since he'd met her, she smiled, not the faint, distant smile of duty, but one of deep, quiet relief. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain and blooming sage. The land, it seemed, had heard.